If it weren't for today's guest, you wouldn't have YouTube on your phone. At least it's fair to say you wouldn't have had YouTube on your phone way back in the late 2000s. Andrey Doronichev, or Andrey Dobry, as he's called, made a big splash in Silicon Valley back then when he led the team that took YouTube mobile. We have him to thank for what's at once become what I call the most valuable tool in the shed when you're trying to troubleshoot a malfunctioning washing machine, and a guilty pleasure of mindless YouTube shorts. Andrey stayed on with YouTube after the Google acquisition as head of YouTube Mobile and director of product management. He left the company in 2021 to try his hand at entrepreneurship, leveraging AI and image recognition technologies as his business mediums. So what's a Silicon Valley superstar have to do with the business of biotech, you might ask? Well, Andrey's latest venture, a startup called BIOPTIC, sits squarely at the intersection of AI and biotech. And if he has his way, it'll create opportunity for biotech builders like you. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Just about everyone launching a new biotech these days claims to sit in the middle of that intersection. Well, if it were anyone other than Andrey Dobry, I'd probably pause before inviting them on the show. But this guy's really done some stuff, and now he wants to do some of that stuff in biotech. So the juice in this episode should be worth the squeeze. I've also asked my friend and colleague Ben Comer, chief editor over at Life Science Leader, to hang out with Andrey and I today. So I'm excited about that. And I suspect you'll be continuing to hear and see more from Ben in the coming weeks. Andrey and
Thanks,
Ben,
Matt.
it's great to have you guys on the show. Great to be together with you guys.
Thanks, Matt. After your introduction, I really want to meet this Andrey guy. Sounds like an awesome person.
Well, you're gonna meet him today, and so is our audience. And I want to start with this this departure from Google. Before you even started getting into the biotech space, what was it that kind of prompted you to move away from Google and start founding these tech startups? Why'd you leave, and what have you been doing since?
Sure. Well, first of all, before I joined Google, I actually had a couple of startups. So I joined Google in 2007 after selling my previous company. And it was a crazy, amazing time to be in tech. And I was extremely lucky to not only be in the forefront of back then emerging mobile internet, but also I had a chance to launch something that lasted, that made sense, even and that makes sense even now as the most useful tool in the shed, as you referred to it. So this app that we started with just a couple of engineers, and then we negotiated, agreed with Google to fund it, and we launched the Nokia version, and then the Android version, and then eventually, I had the privilege to negotiate with Phil Schiller of Apple to launch in the App Store. That one little app went from 0 users to 1 billion users, and it was an incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be part of that team. But that said, I had an amazing run for 13 years. And very frankly, I just felt like we kind of solved a lot of big problems in tech. And at some point, I found myself sort of not being bored, but feeling like we are sort of inventing new problems to solve, because the actual user pains for information access were solved at large, and at least in the domain I applied my knowledge to. Yeah, it was a good time to move on and see what else is there, what other things I can contribute to this world. And I spent some time reflecting and just taking a break after I left Google. And then, it became clear to me that, first of all, it is really hard not to do something, even if you can. And second is that there was happening another revolution in tech, that was machine learning. And that something big was about to happen, and then I really wanted to be at the forefront of this new wave of technology. So I started a company, like a little private AI research team with not very clear mandate. Our thesis was, well, we probably going to build on our strength. Like my co-founders had years of research experience in high throughput information retrieval systems, something similar to YouTube's screening technology that screens every video when you upload it and it makes a decision whether it's a video about cats or it's some violence or some inappropriate material or whatever. It's essentially a system that watches, quote unquote, every video of billions of videos uploaded and then very quickly decides what to do with it. So that's the content ID screening platform, as YouTube called it. And so we had expertise in those kind of high throughput screening technologies, and we thought that there might be other verticals where this technology might be applicable. So we assembled a team. We raised some capital from outstanding investors. Kleiner Perkins was our lead, and Greylock participated in the round, and many others. So with this team, we started just exploring different hypotheses, and here we are. Turns out that screening technology using AI is extremely useful for bio. So that's how eventually we turned into tech bio company.
Andrey, obviously a number of big pharmaceutical companies have used high throughput screening as a development tool using a compound library. Was that the real connection that you found to biotech? I mean, you could have gone into a number of different fields. You chose bio. Was there some other reason that you were interested in bio and human health, or was high throughput screening and the kind of adaptability between those industries a key aspect of it?
The honest answer, and I guess I'll be giving honest answers today. The honest answer is it's both. Like, one, my personal interests. And I'm over 40 now. When I was 30, I really cared about entertainment and content and games and videos, and it was super fun. And I lived by this mantra that Silicon Valley lived by, which was move fast and break things. And it felt very natural. And for those 13 years at Google, it felt very natural to me. And then, like, by the time I left Google, I realized that I'm passionate about other things now. And one thing I found myself really interested in was health. And you know how I said, like, we ran out of pains to solve in tech industry? Well, in health, there are literal pains for billions of people out there that need solution. And so as a reflection of things that became more important to me at this stage of my life, this entrance into bio field feels natural. But also, the honest answer is there was a bit of luck. And what happened was, as we built our screening technology and we were using it for all sorts of use cases, from assessing digital art and detecting fraudulent artworks, to helping banks and financial institutions to detect AI generated driving licenses when they're being uploaded during know your customer KYC flow, right? So all sorts of things can be solved if you have AI that can literally screen billions of items in minutes or hours. And so we've been approaching different industries and testing our solution in different places. And so I went to a conference, to TED in Vancouver, a couple of years ago, and as I was participating and chatting with people, across different industries and academia who participated in the conference, I met this professor, Dr. Art Cherkasov, who is a professor of drug discovery, spent his life working on small molecules and peptides. He is currently a tenured professor at the UBC. And so as we were chatting, I described what we have. And yes, this is where this connection to high throughput screening came to be, because he explained to me that, hey, actually, like, we're having really hard times now that molecular libraries became so big, like orders of magnitudes bigger. he told me, hey, back when we were screening this program, he was telling me about, we had to screen 2 million compounds. And at this point, there are libraries of like 40 billion compounds that are synthesizable. I have no idea how to screen that, what we're going to do, but probably there's a lot of great molecules out there. So we need new technologies that would be way faster, that would speed up discovery of active compounds among those libraries. And so that was how we decided to try applying our tech for this problem.
That's it strikes me as I mean, yeah, there's luck involved, like you said, but it also strikes me as courageous. I mean, it takes courage to pivot from one industry into any industry. I think it takes a special kind of courage to pivot from an industry into biotech. I mean, that's a pretty significant pivot. What were you? I mean, this is sort of a fuzzy question, Andre, but what were you feeling at the time? Was it just straight confidence in the technology and its application in this setting, or was there any trepidation at all? Like, hey, bio, that's science. Science is a little bit different from bits and bytes and feeds and speeds.
Yeah. To this day, I'm questioning my life choices. No, it was really scary, and it still is. I mean, the complexity of biology is like nothing I've ever seen in my life, and I thought I worked in so much complexity in big tech. So I have enormous respect to scientists and life science industry, and I do believe that there's a reason why so many industries already have been disrupted by tech, but I think tech bio we're just scratching the surface, just the beginning, because it's so complex that we needed so much pre-existing technology to make it possible to even approach this field. That said, to answer your question, I have a I have a story. When I came back from this TED, I was intrigued by the idea of applying our tech for drug discovery, and it sounded really cool. The professor, Dr. Cherkasov, was working on a prostate cancer drug. I was like, oh, we can use AI to treat cancer. Isn't it great? Like, it sounds fantastic, right? But truth is, I didn't really take this opportunity seriously at first. I thought it was way too far and way too hard. And at some point, mid last year, I was presenting to one of our investors, to our partner at Greylock, and there were three parts of the presentation, three hypotheses we went after with our technology, and first two made a lot of sense, and I mentioned them to you, like the art detection use case, and we had like revenue and customers. Then actually it was looking pretty good. We had the second test running with banks and AI generated content detection, which was also showing a lot of promise and made sense, especially given that was the time when generative AI just started booming. And then the third I just threw in there, and I was like, hey, well, and we also have this third idea that sounds completely crazy, but we could probably maybe use AI to find molecules and help those academia people and researchers in the industry to find drugs, like drugs for cancer. And I presented those three things, and my partner at Greylock, David Thacker, he looked at me and he went, you know what? I think you should do the third one, the crazy one, the AI drugs one. I was like, wait, what? How so? And he said, look, the first two make a lot of sense, and you have good data and good founder market fit, problem fit, makes a lot of sense. But the last one is the one that gets your eyes to light up. And if I know anything about early stage startups, it takes a lot of passion from the founder to actually make it to the end, because companies normally run out of stamina way before they run out of money. And therefore, I think this is the actual problem you care about. You should work on this one. Honestly, to me, it was shocking. And even after this conversation, I did not immediately react, but it grew on me. And at some point, we had very honest conversation with my co-founders. And we just realized that of all the things we could be solving with this technology that we have, and generally, like we could be solving in the upcoming 5-10 years of our lives, that there's nothing more important, nothing more interesting that helping outstanding researchers out there to get to their goals faster and save lives and help people to deal with disease. So that's how we ended up here.
What I mean, that is fascinating. What was, I guess the first question I have for you is what was the reception beyond that initial conversation with Greylock? You know, your eyes are lit up. This is something we should pursue. And then over the course of time, you know, probably in short order, you expose your intent to the biotech industry, the community. You start talking to other investors. You start talking to potential, you know, customers, use cases. I'm curious about what the reception looked like.
It varied. Obviously, I got a lot of people were skeptical, right? Like I just in general, I found that life sciences industry is hard to penetrate for someone who doesn't have PhD in biology and doesn't have all the credentials in academia or in industry. Like, who am I? Some tech guy deciding to build some technology that would apparently replace scientists, which, by the way, I never said I was going to do. What I was saying was like, hey, before that we were plumbers for ad industry, and now we're going to be building tools for scientists. But anyway, the initial reception varied. However, there was a very important thing for us as entrepreneurs, as startup guys. You know, you either see some traction, you see that you are showing some results early on, or you're not, and that's what matters. And what we did, we started running tests, and we first indexed Enamine's 40 billion molecular library and small molecule library, and just started testing in silico our existing screening technology against a couple of targets that our scientific advisor, Professor Cherkasov, had data for. And we just started running all sorts of tests, trying to see if the results do even make sense. And once we started seeing that there is some light, and actually looks like there might be some good results, it became sort of irrelevant whether or not people on the outside believe that we can do it. Truth is, we have technology, we know how to develop it, we have a process for building it, and we have brilliant scientists who are willing to collaborate with us, testing this technology and seeing if it can be applied to their programs. That is enough to start. So around this time last year, I did two things. I sent an investor update to the rest of our investors saying, hey, we're pivoting to buy and here's why. And I explained the whole thesis. And two, I discovered your podcast and started listening to it to understand how to approach the industry. Like I was completely a complete newcomer. And of course, another thing I have to say, we are privileged to have the investors we have, especially like Kleiner Perkins, who were the original investors in Genentech at round A, and Brooke Byers specifically of KPCB, who was kind enough to kind of give me a lot of initial introduction to this industry, right? He brought me to Laguna CEO Forum, where I met like a bunch of great people who gave me feedback straight away. And that was very honest, very kind of guards down conversations where people were receptive to the fact that I came from a different industry and I like didn't quite know what I was doing. And those conversations really steepened the curve and allowed us to quite quickly start orienting ourselves, at least initially. And we managed to sign our first deals, partnership deals in Q1 of next year. So Q1 this year, basically, right? So just a quarter after like official pivot, which I think was super fast. And just generally, the speed at which we've been moving since we started BIOPTIC. BIOPTIC is the name of our bio AI platform. The speed at which we've been progressing is quite fascinating. Like at this point, we have 13 therapeutic programs across several partnerships in academia and industry, and 2 in-house programs. And we are progressing rapidly. So I think, when you have some results, it makes it easier to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Andrey, I think it says a lot about you and the company that you were able to attract some of these kind of blue chip investors, particularly given the fact that there's so much noise about AI out there. Every new biotech has some sort of AI play. What was there a key attribute or a key piece of technology or a key aspect of yourself and your founding team that you think helped to attract some of those investors in a short period of time?
Yeah. I do have an outstanding team, and I think it was the right place and right time. And we should not forget about this too. Like, we raised our first round, we raised $11 million seed from Kleiner, Greylock, and others in the very beginning of 2022, which was a very peak of venture industry just before it became really sour. And the tech investment climate, especially in AI space at that time, looked way better than bio investment climate, which I didn't realize until after we pivoted into bio, that like actually, the investment was actually quite quiet at that time, right? But in tech, things were really peaking. So we got lucky with timing of our first round. But also answering your question, of course, the biggest reason was the team. Like, I had my tech pedigree, which of course helps a lot when you approach investors. And also my co-founders are incredible AI researchers with like 50 plus prior deep neural nets that they trained from different companies, from Intel and Nivea to Pepsi and Nestle and whatnot. So my co-founders had incredible experience before that, working at the deepest level of ML AI research. And so, yes, of course, every company right now is AI enabled. It's obvious. Like, every company at the moment is using internet, right? Like, it wasn't the case back in the 90s. It's one thing that you're using some neural nets or you're training some models for a specific target that you're working on, a specific therapeutic programs, and you help yourself to progress this program forward with some computational tools. There's a whole different game of trying to build foundational technology that would be target agnostic, that would generalize across many targets and potentially many modalities, and that would really change the game for potentially hundreds of or thousands of biotechs out there, if it's successful. And that is what we are up to, right? We're trying to build something that would be an enabling technology for many, many programs across different targets, different indications, and potentially different modalities too.
In addition to founding BIOPTIC, you also co-founded Mesto in 2020, which is a community of Russian-speaking entrepreneurs. And I'm curious about what the war, Russia and Ukraine, has meant for your business, if it's impeded you in any way, or what you might say about that conflict and its impact.
I know there's always some war and people suffering around the world, but for me personally, as someone who was born in Soviet Union, I immigrated out of Russia 20 years ago. For me, this particular war has been the most heartbreaking, horrible geopolitical event in history. The vastness of this crime, the invasion of Ukraine, the destruction of its cities, and the conquest of their territories, all those things that Russia started in 2022, I cannot describe by any word by a crime. And of course, it had ginormous impact on me personally, on my community, and on our business as well. Well, first of all, like we work with some partners who are physically in Ukraine right now, and which means that you have to work around like some horrific facts that, sometimes there might be a bomb destroying their house, or there could be electricity outages for hours and days. So that is obviously a huge impact. Apart from that, like part of my team are Ukrainians, and some of my key people on the leadership team, who are now in US, are actually came here as refugees from Ukraine. So that is also a significant factor, of course. And besides, as I mentioned before the recording, I think the fact that this war began in February 2022 really forced me as a founder to start this company and raise capital way earlier than I otherwise would have. Because, we were playing with hypotheses, we were contemplating different product ideas. But when the war began, it became obvious to me that we're going to have to be in position to help a lot of people who would need help. Some outstanding tech talent, AI talent from Ukraine and from Russia too, who had to flee from Putin's regime, will need to find their new way of living in different places they would end up, and they would need jobs, and we could help. So in a way, we have some outstanding AI people working for us, which otherwise we would have, it would be hard for us to hire, because they were all employed in some, tech giants or like Kiev-based startups. But because of the war, they needed a job, and we were there to help. So yes, it's a very complex topic for me, but the simple answer to your question, of course, this war had ginormous impact on us, both from business standpoint, from the team standpoint, and from the personal standpoint as well.
And that, my friends, is a difficult question to pivot away from. Tough to find a segue to away from that one. So I'm just going to make it rough. You said something earlier, Andrey, that piqued my interest. You were talking about your partnerships, the number of partnerships that you have going, and then you mentioned a couple of in-house programs.
Yes.
What can you share about that, if anything?
I will try to share as much as possible. I cannot share some of the names because of the deals that we have that we require, like marketing approval. But in broad strokes, we have 13 small molecule programs we're working on at the moment, all preclinical. All are highly novel chemical matter, sometimes known targets. Some of the targets are completely new. Roughly half of them are academia partnerships. So these are the first ones we started with, and that was pretty much the way. I think of those investments from our side as sort of a way to test our technology, but also it's a marketing expense, right? So in those partnerships, we do all the computational drug discovery work, but we also synthesize chemical matter, and then like the partner would run their assays and test the compounds that we synthesize. And so obviously it costs money, but I think it's worth it because in case, we are not ready to publish those results yet, but the results look really promising. So once those papers are out, that's going to be a great way for us to market the platform. But closer to the July last year, we signed our first industry partnership. And I think this is one interesting thing that differentiates BIOPTIC, is that I do think we found an interesting angle into the industry, which is different from what I've seen before. And that is partnering with venture creation funds or bio investors to help them de-risk their asset companies, like single asset companies that they invest in, or help them boost progress on those programs they invest in. And as far as I can see, we are pretty unique in this approach. Like, we developed a bunch of tools that are sort of investor facing and helping them first identify opportunities, assess those opportunities, and then actually help the research team within the program to move faster using our tools. And so that first deal that we signed in July, the first molecule out of 10 has been announced already. It's called Vinder Therapeutics. And it's a $17.5 million partnership in milestones and royalties that are paid to us. And it's an oncology drug, precision oncology. I don't think we disclosed, or they disclosed the target, so I will not go there. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's academia. It's a number of industry partnerships, and we're trying different business models. Like, we have a joint venture with one of the oncology therapeutics companies. We do have this sort of milestone revenue, more like traditional research collaboration deal, and we do have 2 internal targets, one in obesity and one in Parkinson's.
So yeah, those are internal
yes,
projects.
Those are fully owned. Yes.
Yeah.
Those 2.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you look at the, I picture this as sort of a winnowing down, right? Like, you start Optic, you've got a bunch of potential applications in multiple verticals, and then you get excited about the biotech opportunity. And there's an immediate use case, an immediate application that you get to try out and test out. When you survey the biotech landscape and you open your mind up to applications beyond those that you tested early, that you played with early, what do you see? What do you see that you're compelled to perhaps pursue in terms of applications for your technology?
That's a great question, because I'm being very honest here. We started with the use case that just fell on our lap because we had technology and we had someone who wanted to use this technology for hit ID. And then, like, later on, a few months in, you realize that actually that's how most of the first wave of AI drug discovery companies back in 2014 started, like Adam Weiss and Insilica. Everyone started with sort of, okay, small molecules, hit ID. We're going to do some sort of virtual screening technology that will be fast, and whatnot. And so, our tech was, it seems to be working really well. But truth is, it's a pretty crowded space, and it is one of many use cases that need to be solved. And now that we've been at it for a while, we're of course expanding our offering to many more new ideas. Like as I mentioned, for example, by opportunity assessment and tools for investors is kind of a direct result of this better understanding of the landscape. All that said, I think it's pretty clear that we have not, as an industry, we have not solved any of those use cases completely, entirely. It's not like you have a fully generalizable model right now that enables zero-shot de novo small molecule discovery, right? Like, no, or de novo zero-shot for anything, actually, not just small molecules. So there's tons of opportunity at every stage. But as someone mentioned to me, if you want to speed up drug discovery and you're focusing on preclinical tools, it's like you're speeding up the trip from San Francisco to London by speeding up Uber to the airport. And yeah, like it makes sense. Of course, like vast majority of time and money goes into clinical trials. And, I do believe that eventually we will get to the point where we'll be ready to create like digital twins for at least the animal models. And then like maybe at some point, like far, far, far in the future for humans. And so that would be a whole different world. We're nowhere near that yet. But I think for now, realistically, where there is a lot of opportunity, like the initial hit ID, sure, great. Like there's our technology, there's other technologies out there. something has been happening, and like I think right now with new neural net architectures like generative AI, wave of AI, let's call it this way, we have a chance to make it way better. But I do believe that there's a lot of opportunity in multi-parameter optimization, and so like hit to lead and lead opt phases. That's also preclinical, but it's not solved, and there's a lot of stuff that will be happening there. And I see a lot of teams doing a great job at this stages. When it comes to clinical stages, I haven't touched it enough to understand it deeply, but it's also clear to me that there's a bunch of low-hanging fruits. Like, for example, I've been chatting with someone about medical consent procedure when you're trying to enroll a patient in the clinical trials. And it's not solved. The user experience of this procedure is like really, really complex right now. And I think, it's a completely different type of AI technology. But if you imagine like a better designed AI-based consent procedure, that could really make a difference. Because, I'm used to, at Google, you're used to making a small change and creating like millions of dollars of value using this little change, because the overall volume of customers is so big. So in clinical trials, that's where 1% change, 1% increase in efficiency can actually mean tens of millions of dollars of value saved, or in other words, generated for the customer. So that is a huge opportunity too. Like we are remaining in preclinical for now, but as I mentioned before, we're expanding beyond into sort of opportunity analysis and detecting new investment opportunities for investors, which is an interesting, different play. Overall, the industry, I think, the next big frontier, like we're going to figure out chemistry with AI. I think that's pretty clear at this point. But figuring out biology is a whole different game, right? When you design a molecule that theoretically, even like with wet lab validation, like in our cases, we're very proud that the molecules we generate in silico then work well in the wet lab, and you run your assays, and yes, it binds, and yes, like the potency is there, and you're excited. This is not a drug, and this molecule put in a living cell and the whole complexity of it, and then in a living tissue, and then a living organ, and a living body is a whole different level of complexity, which we're not even approaching yet. And I think the next frontier for the AI drug discovery industry, of course, is modeling biology, and which is why I see a lot of my, some of the smartest people I met at Google actually getting there, like Dave Burke, who used to be the engineering manager for my YouTube mobile team back in the day, and then he was the leader at the Android team, recently announced that he is joining Arc Institute to work on cell models. Steph, who used to be a product manager, Stefan Greeken, who used to be the product manager, like fellow product manager at Google, and his partner Daniel Daincho, who used to be an engineering manager on YouTube mobile as well. They co-founded. I'm not sure if Daniel is co-founder, but they both are at Cradle, and they are doing protein generation with AI. So my point is, more and more people who I consider some of the smartest people I ever worked with are moving into this field of solving biology with AI, which is, I think, the next level of complexity after chemistry.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm curious about, I guess first your content recognition technology. Maybe you could give us a kind of overview of that, and then also talk about the data inputs that you're using, particularly with respect to chemistry and now biology. Is there, what kinds of biological data, is coming in? How much is it accessible? Are there types of data that you want that you can't have? I'll stop asking questions right now and let you respond.
Sure. Well, starting from the beginning, our screening tech, the content ID, as we called it, was essentially a super high performance similarity search engine. So in simple terms, it would enable you to index billions of items, whatever. It could be like, for us, it's all vectors, right? But it is a vector representation of some information. It could be an image, it could be a video, it could be a molecule. And then, the way our platform was engineered initially was designed for speed so that you can perform a very quick searches and find similar vectors to the one that you are looking at. And depending on what you encode with this vector, you can apply this technology for different content types. So initially, as I said, we did it for videos or for images, but when it comes to molecules, this is where the term similarity search might be confusing, because like in chemistry or in drug discovery, when people say similarity search, they mostly mean structural similarity. So you look for a molecule that is structurally similar to the one you started with. In our cases, we meant something completely different. So what we encoded as those vectors were activity profiles of molecules. So we took data initially from binding DB, which essentially is in simple terms would be a small molecule in the protein, a pocket of a protein that it binds to. And so that together would be an activity profile for us. We would encode it, and then we would index this this data. And that would enable us to find for, like in some other larger data set, like for example, enamines synthesizable compounds database. We could find a small molecule that would be completely different structurally from the ones that we've ever seen in our original training data set, but that, according to the neural net, would have similar activity profile to something that you care about. Like, for example, think of a patent busting use case. Like, when we started BIOPTIC, everyone was crazy about GLP-1s, right? So great, you log into BIOPTIC and you take a known ligand for whatever GLP-1, you put it into the system and ask it to search, let's say, a billion compound data set that either you brought as a library or something from one of our partners like eMolecules or Enamine. And what BIOPTIC would be able to do is to find, let's say, 100 molecules that would be less than 0.4 tanimoto similarity with the original molecule that you put in. However, they would have similar activity to the same receptor. And that was the original use case for like our very first technology when we just straight up adopted our first technology to bio. Of course, since then, we've built a lot of new tools. Like our new model that we're really proud of and we're really excited about, a structure-based model that we designed, works using completely different principles at this point, which means that you can just input any protein sequence for your target. It could be a completely novel target. It could be a target with no 3D structure resolved, actually. And the model would design a small molecule, or it would find a small molecule among the library that you would provide that would most likely bind to this pocket. And it will detect the pocket itself, pocket automatically. It will understand the 3D structure automatically. So you skip the whole alpha fold or crystal structure step altogether, and it just spits out a number of molecules that you would take to the wet lab. So now it's a whole different game.
Yeah, and you mentioned several different databases that you're using to access that molecular data. Are you building a kind of proprietary database of BIOPTIC's own at this point? Are you still on the, always trying to bring in increasingly more data from more sources? What's your view on that?
Well, data is a huge problem for the industry in general, right? Let's start there. What I didn't realize getting into bio was, our thesis was we should be building AI for industries where there's a lot of data, a lot of capital, and not enough native AI talent. That's how we started. And bio seemed like a perfect industry. clearly a lot of data, clearly a lot of money, and probably like vast majority of people who graduate with data science, machine learning degrees, they do not go to Pfizer or Merck. They go to OpenAI at Google and Google. So it felt like, okay, this is an interesting opportunity for us to work on. However, when when I looked into this, we realized that vast majority of data is proprietary, and in fact, it's not normalized. It's very often very noisy. There's loads of problem, and I think even a bigger problem for someone like us who's trying to build a foundational target agnostic technology is that the kind of data that the kind of data collection and generation technologies that you need if you're working on a specific program or specific target or even a specific modality, that your approach to data generation is different from when you're trying to build something horizontal. When you try to build something horizontal, you need a very diverse data set. You cannot afford paying per data point as much as you would pay if you were working on a very narrow domain around certain target, for example. There's a whole new set of challenges in terms of data generation if you're trying to do it across a vast chemical space, vast domain. So it's not a solved problem. Like all of the binding DB that we initially used to train our first model, I think it was like less than 10 million data points. It's like, I don't remember exact number, but it's something like around, let's say 10 million data points. The number of tokens that was used to train GPT, that was the first like truly generalizable language model, was around 1 trillion tokens, right? So it's what, 6 orders of magnitude, right? Difference. We are nowhere near a number of data points needed. And that's just in this one particular idea of like binding, right? But there's so many more parameters that you need to optimize. So the industry itself does not have data. Even if we could pull all the data from all the proprietary sources at the moment, I'm convinced we don't have enough data to actually build something truly generalizable. And so, like right now, there's a new crop of tech bio companies that are trying to solve this from different angles. Dell libraries is interesting technology, phage displays, interesting stuff. And I think there's a reason why we're seeing so much progress in protein design right now is because sequence-based data in many cases can be synthetically generated. Like you can actually pre-train models with a lot of synthetic data, which is a fantastic opportunity. Doesn't solve all of your problems, but our new structure-based model is actually using pre-trained parts, like it's using parts of ESM, which was trained on billions of possible protein sequences. And so this combination of like real world technologies for measuring real wet experiments, but in a way that is economically viable, and combining it with either pure synthetic data or better scraped and better normalized and better classified public data from more niche sources, like negative data from failed programs, for example, which is, I think, for now is still untapped opportunity. Like combining all those sources together is probably like what a lot of companies like ours are going to be doing over the next decade or so.
Do you see anything afoot that might contribute to the solution to that dearth of available data? And when I say that, I mean like any collaborative efforts, any industry-wide efforts to unlock some of this proprietary data, or to your point, some of this negative data that usually kind of gets left on the cutting room floor and ignored for its value to technologies like yours. I mean, if you look out 3-5 years, do you see any influences that might not create a glut, but at least reverse the dearth of data that we're looking at right now?
My honest answer is I don't know. I mean, there's been initiatives that looked promising, like Melody, right? It sounded like an interesting way of like federated learning, but I don't know if it like what was the impact of it. For now, my personal bet is that it's still going to be massive investment in data generation pipelines through automation, through new specifically designed assays that would make it possible to do it at a massive scale. Maybe some cross-modality data generation, like adapting sequence-based data and maybe like building like a Google Translate, quote unquote, for peptides to small molecules, like that kind of stuff. There's ideas. There's like plenty of teams with ideas of how to build a data generation pipeline that would enable you to generate like billions or even trillions of new data points. And so my bet for now is that one of those efforts will more likely to succeed and actually start like generating new massive data sets across different targets, rather than existing data sets will somehow be reconciled and unlocked and whatnot. There's too much headwind in the way this industry is set up. Data is gold, and just like the way big pharma is set up is such that it's not really designed for sharing data at this point. Yeah. Like even for us, we are working with many customers, right? But we cannot really use specific data points from customer programs to train our foundational model because, there's an IP issue, right? So basically all those data points that we can use to refine a model for a specific program and actually make it more efficient for this target or this particular molecule, it is not really contributing to other programs. So we have to generate our own data that's actually like clean IP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How are you doing on time, Andrey?
I'm okay. Like
You're
Joe
okay?
Joe Rogan me as much as you want, but yeah, I totally get it that at some point you'll have to cut it in pieces. So please stop when you feel like we should.
No, that's the direction we're going. We're going to turn this one into a 3-hour long episode. Good. I want to pivot a little bit to the landscape of AI players of several different flavors in biotech right now, and get a sense for where BIOPTIC fits and what you see playing out in this sort of nascent. I say nascent, but I mean it's maturing rapidly, I think, at least in terms of volume and applications. You've worked your entire career in some pretty competitive high-tech environments, so I'm curious about your perspective on this. We've had on this show a number of notable and well-funded biotechs that are building on AI backbones. I think of companies like Recursion. Chris Gibson's been on the show before, yes. Which just acquired Accenture. I mean, that's a powerhouse there. Ben referenced when we were chatting in advance of the episode, Hong Kong-based in Silico Medicine, another one. Just a couple weeks ago, Vic Bajaj from Foresight Labs was on the show, and they just launched a new company called Zera, a biopharmaceutical development company called Zera, with $1 billion in funding behind it, AI driven. Yeah. So there's that. You look at like in the mid tier, like Flagship Pioneering, every company that they spin out these days has got an AI backbone. And then further downstream, looking at like sort of the service, like application service providers, if you will, you've got a ton of these little, I shouldn't say little, but smaller sort of it's cottage industry of companies like Profluent and Evolve. They've been on their founders have been on the show as well, and they're looking to provide AI as a service to biotechs. As it stands right now, and then maybe forward looking, a few years down the road, where do you kind of see BIOPTIC fitting on this landscape?
Sure. Well, first let's talk about my view on the industry in general. I think every pharma in 10 years from now will be AI first pharma. Like, to me, it's pretty clear, right? At the end of the day, drug discovery and drug development is about working with vast amount of data, making decisions, and progressing and designing something using this data. We've been doing it originally like science was done hypothesis-driven way, where human with big brain comes up with some great idea and then collects some data to refine this idea, builds a very local, very specific model to sort of help steer in a close proximity to the original hypothesis, and like then either prove it or disprove it, and move on. And we move from that world to the world where we do data first research, where we're mining ginormous data sets, and then like nowadays we're creating some super smart foundational models that can generalize foundational concepts from those data sets, and then start spitting out decisions that were not even human driven. It's a whole different world we're approaching. And so to me, it's pretty clear that human brain's ability to deal with vast amounts of data over the next 10 years will not evolve dramatically. However, our AI technologies will improve orders of magnitudes. Right. So to me, it's pretty obvious that just like every retail became an e-commerce over the last 15 years, 20 years, similarly, every pharma will be an AI company going forward. Now, what does it take to be a great AI company? Well, I think to build AI advantage, you need three things, very roughly. Right? You need talent advantage, so you need to have people who are really good at it. You need data advantage, and you need compute advantage. And eventually, compute advantage means for now, it means do you have access to chips? Eventually, it will mean do you have access to enough energy? So at this large scale, if you think of this like from the top level, right? If the transition from today to the future of pharma is similar to the transition from like old school retailers to today's retail, which is all e-commerce enabled, and you think of the number of enabling technologies and different kinds of companies that make this transition possible, you realize that there's a lot of opportunity. In the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of different shapes and forms of companies that contribute to this eventual outcome of an AI-enabled pharma. And sure, like in e-commerce, you had a fully vertically integrated players like Amazon, who started in the very beginning of this transition, and were very different from retailers back then. And at that time, like brick and mortar retailers were, laughing at them. And then eventually, this huge vertically integrated companies became the massive dominating force. And so, I think we're going to see that in pharma. So, we probably will find some new big pharma that will be an AI-first company. And maybe Zyra is one of those companies. Maybe Isomorphic will be one of those companies. I don't know. But again, like drawing this parallel with retail, you also see that there's a lot of horizontal technology companies that enable different parts of the stack. And you have tons of smaller shops run by e-commerce platforms like Shopify, or using Shopify technology, or you have the ginormous company Stripe that is essentially like enabling all the payments industry, and so on and so forth. There's so much in the stack to unpack, and each one of those layers is a ginormous opportunity. So back to your question, yes, there's a lot of AI companies out there, and they have all sorts of different shapes and forms when you double click into them. Some of them are, effectively a biotech that is using AI technology to progress a number of assets they care about. Some of them are trying to be a horizontal platform, but let's say those were like the first wave of AI companies back in 2010, 2014. They just didn't have enough enabling technology back then, and nor they had enough data or compute to actually deliver on that promise. And so we saw a lot of very disappointing, cases where companies just did not deliver and did not get even with one asset into clinic over the last 10 years, right? And we'll know different examples here. I think there's a new wave of companies right now that are relying on the modern AI technology that transform architecture, like the new generation of chips that enable way bigger sort of data processing capability. And that also they do their own high throughput data generation. And so I think this is like the current state of the art, and there's a lot of excitement there. And some of them are trying to be like sort of a horizontal platform enablers, and some of them are also just using this technology for their own internal therapeutic programs. And so from now on, like in the future, as I mentioned, I do think that there's going to be more and more new, like next generation AI companies that would actually try to solve biology and model cells and maybe even bigger like tissues and organs using AI technology. We're nowhere near that yet. I don't know when it's going to happen, but there's also going to be a huge next wave, a big new crop of companies that will enable that at some point. All that to say is, yes, there's a bunch of companies out there. I do think there's a lot of opportunity, and then the question is like, how do you combine your talent advantage, your data advantage, and your compute advantage vectors to create a meaningful proposition? In our case, we do have talent advantage for sure. Just, we, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're lucky to be able to hire people who otherwise would have worked at Google or Intel, or like, our head of science is from Atomwise, and we have people from Insilico, from Neuralink, from Apple, working on BIOPTIC. It's a very strong team. We are working on our data advantage strategy at the moment. Like, we have our own strategy that we're pursuing, but I'm not ready to disclose it yet. We do not have any compute advantage beyond, like, comparing to Google or NVIDIA. We don't have our own data centers. We don't have our own chips. So that is the part where, at some point we'll have to figure something out, but we're relying on existing platforms and we're not limited by it for now. And as a go-to-market strategy, I think we found a very interesting angle that actually enabled us to sign those first deals, like first commercial deals. And, I'm really excited about what's to come next year, because this approach of trying to get to market through people who enable investments in single asset companies or smaller biotechs, it's a meaningful strategy that so far worked well for us. So partnering with venture creation funds, bringing our talent advantage and our technology to their investments to de-risk them and help discover new opportunities, altogether seem to be working for us. And we'll see where we end. And one last thing I wanted to mention is, software company versus, more classic asset ownership. Like, there's always going to be a debate there. When we started, as you can imagine, like, I come from consumer applications world. Of course, we wanted to build pure software play, but just, learning more about this industry, we realized that the way to capture value is to have a share in the actual assets and selling results rather than selling services or software. So at this point, we are, the way we try to monetize is through equity in the resulting assets. And I know that there are like some very successful companies who go pure software way, but we picked this path, and for now, it's working well for us.
Andrey, I wanted to ask a question about your internal pipeline. I think you mentioned a preclinical program with GLP-1s and in Parkinson's as well. I was curious, how you chose those, if it was, if it had more to do with the data that you have access to, or, you're looking at therapeutic areas. Obviously, GLP-1s, obesity, and diabetes are hugely lucrative. Parkinson's, huge unmet need. What would you say about, the choosing, I guess, of those programs? And then if you have any sense of how far away you are from clinical trials.
Yeah, to clarify, we do not have GLP-1 program. We are working on TINIC target, and we believe that, like, our hypothesis is that it is a target that can be relevant in obesity indication. And yes,
everybody these days is just associating obesity with GLP-1s. Easy to do.
Yes, but there are other targets too.
Yeah.
Yes, and answering your question, how we picked those targets, very honestly, just following business opportunity. So those are not completely novel targets, right? The existing molecules for either of the targets we're going after. we saw an opportunity. We needed something to start testing our technology independently without any delays from partners and whatnot. So we picked a couple of reasonably hot targets where we knew that was different enough to test our technology in different ways. And we knew that in case those go well, we can have a valuable asset. So we're pursuing them. We're going to solve whatever. We're going to predict clinical trials one outcomes, toxicity outcomes at the early stages using our technology and whatnot, like all sorts of things like that. Altogether, they are platform technologies that are platform agnostic, that are target agnostic, and that potentially make resulting biotech more capital efficient.
Yeah.
And yes, Matt, like you did mention that maybe one day we found ourselves being a biotech. Someone told me, a fellow tech bio founder told me once, well, when tech bio fails, it becomes a biotech.
Is that how it works?
If you cannot sell your platform, you cannot like make your platform valuable enough to scale it the way you initially planning, like what we are thinking of right now, then yes, you end up just valuing your company at the value of the assets you've developed so far. Mm-hmm. And that's why like there was a lot of disappointment with first wave of AI companies who really, really tried super hard to build a scalable platform and did not invest enough into moving their internal assets to like clinical stage. And then by the time became clear that platform itself is not monetizing, they didn't have any clinical stage assets. And at this point, okay, like they're not valuable anymore, right? And so those like huge drops in valuations that we've seen are driven by that. So we're trying to like kind of be somewhere, we're balancing between the two, because yes, we are tech bio, but we do try to own equity in all the programs that we're working on, and that's how we try to seize capture the value that we're creating.
Andrey, I apologize if I missed this earlier, but did you, and to the point that you were just making, do you have an approximate timeline of when you might go into the clinic with your internal assets?
These are the forward-looking statements we ask for when there's no public relations or investor relations representative on the call with you.
Yes. And I, as much as I would like to boast about our uber optimistic timeline and roadmap, yes, of course we have a roadmap and we are, pushing really hard to get there. I do not think that it would be appropriate to make those statements in this call. However, what I do want to say is that at least with those two assets that we own, our goal to hopefully set a record timeline from starting the program to IND enabling studies phase, but that is yet remain to be seen. We had a killer year. It's been super fast, and every advisor and every investor we have told me that it's unprecedentedly fast. How we got from where we started to where we are now. However, it doesn't mean that it's going to go as fast over the next year. I'm very optimistic, though.
Are there any specific plans that you can share with us for 25? I mean, this episode is gonna drop right around the turn of the year, so give us kind of a glimpse or a forward-looking hope or forecast, right, for 25.
Sure, I can talk about the platform plans, and that's the part I'm mostly excited about. As I mentioned earlier, we have developed our new structure-based model that is extremely promising. Like, think of it, it would enable things that, state-of-the-art models like AlphaFold 3 enable at the moment, but it's a ridiculously simplified architecture, which means it's way more nimble, it's easier to deal with. The way we describe it internally is if you're following space industry, and you might have seen like this transition from Raptor 1 engine to Raptor 3 engine in SpaceX, where they dramatically simplified the design of the engine, removed a lot of like tubes and components that were like covering this original design, and that makes the whole thing way more manageable. So this is how we think about BIOPTIC 1, the structure-based model that we're working on. So the plan for the next year would be, once we have all the data ready, to publish a paper on it and actually present it to the world like in a more public way. But meanwhile, we're using it for a number of programs to actually progress those molecules internally. So that's one, structure-based model and publishing the paper around it. And two, on the business side, fingers crossed. I mentioned one deal that we signed last year, but we have a couple more exciting deals that are in the works right now. So I hope we'll be able to announce all of them sometimes, earlier next year, hopefully. And actually, like at this point, I could be less cryptic about our partners and people we're working with and the kind of deals we sign.
Yeah. What about internal growth, like company growth? Are you looking to make any strategic hires, grow personnel or talent there?
Yes, we've tried, we have an outstanding team at the moment, and I try to move as fast as possible with as small number of humans employed as possible. That said, we are, I feel like we're reaching the limit, so we're going to be hiring both on the science side, on like a life science side of things, and also on the computational science, so AI researchers. We're probably going to start growing our business team too, but that I'm not sure about. And I think like sometime next year, we're going to be raising the next round. We're getting ready to.
Yeah, very cool. Well, listen, we've been abusing your time, Andrey. I appreciate all the time that you've given us, but we do need to wrap things up. And you just brought up, you were talking about the computational team and the biology team. And I want to have you back on the show for a more, maybe a tighter episode where I don't keep you for an hour and a half, to talk about that, the marriage of these two things. We've been talking about the marriage of computational minds and biology minds for a couple of years now. And when we first started talking about that, it was sort of like, well, you put them in the same room and you make them talk to one another. But now as this concept has matured, and you have companies like BIOPTIC that are actually bringing, onboarding this talent. I think it'd be fun to have a conversation about how we're consummating this marriage in real time. So if you're game for that, we're going to have you back on sometime down the road to talk about that and all the progress that we expect to see out of BIOPTIC in the coming year.
I'd be privileged to come again and talk about the marriage of tech and bio, because I think that's the most interesting thing that is happening in the industry at the moment. Yeah. All the most interesting things, they happen at intersections, and the intersection of AI, which is essentially artificial evolution life, and bio, which is the actual evolution life. This intersection seems to be the most exciting thing there is.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're fun to talk to about it, so I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Andrey.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Andrey.
So that's BIOPTIC founder and CEO, Andrey Dobry. I'm Matt Pillar.
I'm Ben Comer.
And you just listened to the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Life Science Connect, and we can be found on lifescienceleader.com and anywhere you listen and subscribe to podcasts. Do that, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Be sure to leave us some feedback on how we're doing, or a guest or topic suggestion, or just say hi. We drop every Monday. Keep it dialed. And as always, thanks for listening.